Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest live episode of VOX VOMITUS. I'm your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of Pretty Ugly, From Daylight Till Madness, When the Sleeping Dead Still Talk, and The Japanese Vox, and Other Stories. Joining me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of the BIRDBOX, which includes Dibs Since September, Move On Melinda, Climb the Salmon Ladder, and Ranters Take Manhattan.
You didn't take your inhaler today, did you?
It's allergy season. I did take it, but it doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
Everything's blooming. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Craig DiLouie here with us today, and I'm just going to say I'm a fangirl. 1, I've wanted to have Craig on the show for a while. 2, 3, I'm going to try to be like normal during this interview. I'm going to fail miserably, but we have Craig DiLouie. He's here to talk about how to make a horror movie and survive. I have the physical book, but I ended up listening to the audio because I was so obsessed with the audio book of his book, episode 13, that I was like, I am now like an audiobook convert for Craig. So Craig, welcome to VOX VOMITUS. Tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about you, and then a little bit about how to make a horror movie and survive.
Sure. So I'm what's called a hybrid author. I started started writing in the 90s. I'm kind of an old guy, so I started writing in the 90s, and in that decade, it was a lot different in publishing. There was a lot more gatekeeping, for better or worse, however you want to see that. But what it meant for people like me is, you had to get an agent to get into Big Five, and you had to get an agent to get published, but you needed to get published to get an agent. And I felt like I was in a Kafka novel where I had this gold invitation to attend a party I wasn't allowed into. And back then you would send out SASE, self-addressed stamped envelopes. Everything was by the mail. And
Craig, we're older, I think, than we look. We just have some really strong lighting on our faces.
So for any of your, I don't believe you.
No, so anyway, we know that that era as far as like the self-addressed stamped envelope. So that does exist. But for our younger viewers, they're probably like, what?
What's a stamp?
Yeah, back then you would send in like a sample and a letter, and you would send the SASE so that they would be able to mail you back your rejection. And so one time I mailed to just salt on the wound. A quick little story. I was pitching agents cold, through the slush pile, cold calling, and one of them used my SASE to mail me back the form rejection with a flyer for his book that he wrote, how to get published.
Oh my gosh. I feel like, Craig, you just pretty much, that story is exactly why Allison and I started this podcast 5 years ago, was to talk to authors, not only about like how awesome their books are, but also to like talk to authors about, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on in this industry?
Yeah, the business is it's a fascinating business. I love
we'll say fascinating.
Fascinating is definitely a word for it that I would not use, but that's okay.
A different F word.
Well, but things have become obviously a lot more democratic in the last 20, 25 years. And so I started with small press. Back then you could do on-demand printing. And so there was all these little microbrew presses that came along, and they gave me my first shot. And I eventually worked my way up, and I almost was ready to give up because my daughter was born, and I'm like, why am I, but I had this crazy idea for a zombie novel. And so I wrote a zombie novel at a time just before The Walking Dead came out. And I was, success in publishing is really just the right book at the right place at the right time.
You found the zombie zeitgeist.
Yeah,
it was you that did this.
I was always fascinated with apocalyptic fiction, and just wrote it on a lark, almost like my last hurrah for this hobby I had. And sales exploded on it. It led me into Imaginative Press. I got a couple more zombie books published. Back then there were maybe 20 or 30 of us writing books in that subgenre, but then that exploded. It got super saturated. I got out of zombies, but I had enough success to be able to get an agent, and the agent got me into Simon & Schuster with a post-apocalyptic vampire novel called Suffer the Children,
Which
was
oh, sorry, this
Fiona?
is where the fangirl thing started
Yeah.
with me, Craig.
But it was a really horrible, it was a really bad deal, and it proved the adage, if you want a deal bad enough, you get a bad deal, which I did. But you know, to me, writing,
I haven't heard that. Can I go write that down? Hold on.
I
yes,
know.
you may.
I was like, I
I
haven't
stole
heard
it from a
that,
friend
but
of mine named AJ Glazer. But
oh, that just gave me chills. Oh, but like also I want to cry and just drink
yeah,
a bottle of whiskey
but
right now. Like, oh, that's the truth.
publishing to me it's not a race, even though it feels like it. You watch what everybody else is doing, and you always feel like they're doing better or whatever, you know. But it's not a race; it's a marathon, and it's a very, very, very long game. If if you're like me, I don't know how to do anything else. You know, I can't do anything else. I'm really worried about AI because I can't do anything else. So
Neither can AI.
Neither can
yeah.
AI. Yeah. AI's not doing a great job at it.
No.
So
No. But you know, it's still a bit of a worry for the future. But so so I looked at it like, I don't care if it's a bad deal, because it gets me into Big Five, and then I can move.
It's
And
the
so
door opener deal.
yes, and that book earned out, and I still get really substantial royalty checks from that book, and that was published 11 years ago. So I'm really proud of that one,
I will say,
and I'm happy it worked out the way it did. And it got me I got it with a different agent. They got me into Hachette, and I've been with Hachette ever since, and I've done 8 books with them. The next book is coming out in July. It's called My Ex the Antichrist, which I had to tell my ex. We were talking about my ex-wife before we started talking, and I just want to shout out there to her that
she's not inspiring this.
It's not about you.
Okay.
But yeah, it's about a female pop punk guitarist who's in a band with her boyfriend, who turns out to be the biblical Antichrist, and so
I love it.
You have to find out if rock and roll really can save the world. And it's written epistolary, similar to episode 13.
I love epistolary.
Yeah, but it's like an oral history in the Daisy Jones vein. And so I think it's a lot of fun, and I think
well, we'll have to have you back for that for sure. But with Suffer the Children, I'm just going to say I've purchased that book so many times over the last 11 years, and I read it when it first came out, and then I moved, I sold the book, and then I saw it like on Kindle, and I was like, that sounds so good, just up my alley. Bought it again, read like the first 2 pages, and I'm like, oh, I've read this.
That's why I liked it.
Yeah, this is why I liked it. It is my jam. But I'm part of, there's a Facebook group called Books of Horror that has like 60,000 members. It's super, super active. But I'm going to say there's not a week that goes by that somebody doesn't post about Suffer the Children still in that group.
Yeah, it's undead itself. It's unkillable. It just keeps popping up.
Well, and I just need to throw in the stupid biblical reference. When you said epistolary, the only reason certain people like me know what that word means is the epistles, the letters written. So if anybody's like, what's an epistolary novel? It just means letters. So it's
letters,
not a biblical
term. Found footage.
Yeah, I like the term found footage, but that's also just because that's one of my big jams. So once you said that, I'm like, yes, I need that book now. Thank you very much.
So
yeah,
Allison,
I actually didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Allison, if you've listened to episode 13 yet, but
no, I did that.
It's arguably in my top 5 audiobooks of all times.
Well, and I am an audiobook girl because that's all I have time to do, because all I do is drive around, and I'm mostly a professional chauffeur to my children, which is the one thing I do that gets me no money. But that's what I have time for. So when someone tells me, oh, the audiobook was good, that's all I really need to hear, and I'm on board for that. So we were supposed to actually have Craig earlier, so I hurried to read this book because I wanted to be done with that. So now I get the whole backlist, please. So order them for me so I know which ones to read first. But if that's the best audio, then that's easy.
It's the best. Yeah, it's so good, and you'll love it because it's all found footage. But how to make a horror movie and survive. Craig, this book came out, I feel like the past year and a half, there have been a lot of like meta horror movie books. This came out a horror movie by Paul Tremblay came out.
Yes.
Experimental film by Gemma Files came out. There was so
that was a she was one of the first. Yeah. Got to give her that.
So when you knew this was coming out, did you start to hear the buzz about all the horror movie books coming out and go, oh shit?
Yeah.
Or did you go, ka-ching?
Until I was exposed to this gonzo theory called morphic resonance, Rupert Sheldrake. And it's like if someone does something that previously had not been done, it will suddenly crop up as a behavior everywhere.
Yep.
And with the idea that everything is connected. So I don't know about that, but man, sometimes it feels like it. Like, you write these books and they, you're starting several years ago. Okay.
Right,
because of the way that Big Five publishing works, it's a very long publication cycle. So you're talking 2 to 3 years, but between concept to print. And so I'm sitting there thinking, oh yeah, I found my own little
breaking ground.
Yeah. I mean, we're all derivative.
Yeah.
Everyone's derivative to an extent. But you still think, oh, I'm going to do this. And even though it has been touched on, I'm going to carve out my own path and it's going to stand out. And then, you find out that not only is there a flood of these books, but there's this dude named Paul Tremblay you may have heard of.
A little known author.
Yeah. He's
very tall,
up and coming, But anyway, rock star Paul Tremblay has a book called Horror Movie, almost your title. Similar color scheme. We changed our cover because of his book coming out the same week.
Oh no.
I'm like, really, God, anyway, I was like, okay, all right, I guess we're doing
Well, I will say all of the books, because I read them all, are so different from each other.
Exactly.
Yes.
But I remember
I love
one
Paul
week.
Tremblay's book. I did read it.
We
did too.
Yeah, we read each other's book.
I feel like 3 of the books I had on pre-order one week were, because I got Horror Movie, I got your book, and I think there was another one. It might be Home is Where the Bodies Are Buried, but the book looks like a old VHS and it's about home movies and stuff. So that week, I got 3 books that all had these cool cameras or movie covers, and I'm like,
I feel like that's just asking for a really nice Instagram post because they look so nice together.
I know.
It's like they're just really kind of having that same vibe. But I will say I only also read Paul's. I didn't read the other ones that you mentioned. But I feel like those books are so very different, even if they start in the same place, that comparing them is they're almost not even in the same genre. As far as the tone and the feel of the book, and the style,
100%.
They're so different. And your book, I enjoyed Paul's in one way, but your book was, I can't say the F word, romp. It was so much fun. And it really also explored what it is. Why do we want horror? Why do we want it as a book? Why do we want it as a movie? And
why do we root for characters
why are we doing this
to get slaughtered in more and more gruesome ways?
And I feel like your book really is that kind of that meta narrative, but also the analysis that you rarely see in a book about the genre. It's it would be a book in romance. It'd be why do we want the sappy love story? Why is Hallmark Channel a thing? And it would have to examine that. I've never read a book like that. Maybe I should write that. I'm not doing that right now. But this kind of thing, as far as that feel and who your characters are, it's very, very different. The scenarios are very, very different. So, I wouldn't worry about that. If anything, it also, I would throw in that category. I think Clay McLeod Chapman's The Remaking is kind of along similar lines too, as far as we're making a horror movie and what is that like. But this one had its own feel and its own, it was absolutely an amazing audiobook to listen to. And again, that vacillation between I'm rooting for people to die. Wait, stop.
I know. The amount of times I was like, do not use that haunted camera. Do not.
Don't do it.
And then a character would say or do something. And I'm like, well, maybe just film them.
Just that.
Yes.
Just them.
Well, and all the caveats you had too. I don't want to spill too many of the book's secrets and kind of keep some of it hush hush, but Jennifer mentioned the haunted camera, and there's also caveats about how the camera can or could or should be used, that it's not as simple as it's not a weapon you can control, if that makes sense.
Right.
I don't want to say
did he have a choice?
Did he have a choice?
I guess I should tell your
tell us about the
just
book.
tell the reviewers what So How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive it's a novel set in the 80s, and there's very popular slasher director. So you have the Pantheon, Freddy and Michael Myers and Jason, and then there's Jack the Knife, which is the creation of Max Mari. So it's very steeped in the time period. This was the heyday of slashers, and horror was seeing a real renaissance because it was the era of big money productions. The auteur days of the 70s were over, when a director could make an artsy film. And now it's all about formula, crowd pleasing, getting people in seats, big explosions, muscle action heroes, formula. But in horror, it was like punk rock. It was like the middle finger to you could do it with a super low budget on a simple formula, which is, if you are horrifying people, then that is horror and you are doing your job. And the lower budget, the better, because it was very gritty, and it became even more horrifying because you didn't know what was going to happen. This was unsafe territory. 16 millimeter, like it's grainy. This is scary. Automatic, right? And so Max is like sort of became very, very successful in this genre, but he's now on his third movie of the Jack the Knife series, and people are laughing in the theater, and they're rooting for Jack to kill people, and there's a little bit of a teased romance.
They're laughing.
Yeah, and there were all these like formula.
Jack the Knife is kind of flirty now.
Like,
and he does like this little dance to the song Mac the Knife, and with it they got one of those rooms that rotates, so he's walking around the walls and singing the song, and everybody's like and he's like, I failed because I'm trying to scare the crap out of you, and you're having fun. What does that mean? Why are you having fun? And so he comes across this haunted camera, and it has the ability to kill, but there's a catch. Who does it kill and why? And why? And he finds this, and he becomes inspired because his producer's pressuring him to make a Jack the Knife 4. He's going to be trapped in this, and he has a bit of a condition where he's thinking about his own mortality and what his legacy is going to be. And here this camera lands in his lap, and the ability to make visceral horror, something that's so real you can't look away. You're absolutely horrified. You confront your own mortality on the spot, and it's actually physically sickening. And he is like, I could make the perfect horror movie with this. So he has to wrestle with this. And while all that is happening, we meet Sally. Sally is she's a scream queen, and she's been cast as the bad girl over and over again. She's trying to be the final girl, the one girl who makes it, and she ends up cast in his film. And so it's basically the last act, or even second half of the book, is basically about the making of a horror movie in a studio, and then you go out into the desert to the ruins at Atomic Beach in California, and you are the book is about the making of this movie, and a horror director wants to make a perfect horror movie by killing his cast, and the scream queen who wants to survive the night. And so that's basically the premise.
Now, I loved it so much. Oh, sorry.
I just have to add, for me as a child of the 80s, the extra bit of horror for me, at least as far as the earlier part of like the knife part, is I'm picturing that horrifying McDonald's ad where the guy is the moon walking around. That appeared in my head every single time we were talking about that movie series. I'm like, please tell me he doesn't look like that. It's just a person, right? But honestly, it would be pretty horrifying if it's this walking moon guy coming around and stabbing people. I know that was not intentional, but now I'm showing my own age. So there we go.
For me, it reminded me so much of, I was a child of the 80s as well. And I remember when I saw the first Nightmare on Elm Street, it broke my brain. I'd never been so terrified in my entire life. But then by 6th grade, I can't remember what Nightmare on Elm Street movie was coming out, but I was writing Freddy Krueger fan fiction that I turned in for like a short story for my class, and I did write it as like a rom-com of Freddie and Nancy. And my teacher wrote no on it, and I didn't get a grade, and he didn't want to see anything else from me. But I remember, can't remember which Nightmare on Elm Street came out right before that, but it was like Freddy was funny. And I remember thinking, oh, I hate this. Yet I was still writing terrible 10, 11-year-old fan fiction about Freddy being funny and flirty. Oh.
So that's the thing, what is the responsibility of horror? That's one of the questions and the many questions in the book, which is, oh, thank you, Vince. One of the questions in the book is horror fun? Is horror, does it have a responsibility to be, should it be original? Should it satisfy expectations? How much should it satisfy expectations? Why are we even drawn to this? I mean, horror is something we do our absolute utmost to, avoid in real life. There's not a whole lot of even wish fulfillment involved with it. We don't want horror anywhere near our real life.
I know. I've never thought to myself, gosh, I hope I can survive a killer stalking me through this like abandoned neighborhood. I've never wanted that.
No.
Yet I would watch any movie in the entire world that had a final girl like being chased through a neighborhood escaping a serial killer. I've watched a million of them.
Well, so Vince Laguno says, love Craig's book. It was just so good. It soothed the slasher lover's soul. And I was actually going to shout out earlier when we were talking about Sally Priest and how she's like, I could be like Jamie Lee Curtis. And I knew as soon as I said Jamie Lee Curtis, Vince would magically appear from the ether.
I thought of Jamie Lee Curtis probably at the same time. And that was just enough for Vince to appear,
to come here and say that, because I did love that. Because so talking about Sally as a character, I love how she was like, okay, this is what I'm called to do. I'm good at this. But her mother's like, ugh, how is it that, horror, this isn't legitimate. This is going to kill your career. And the things that her own mother did for her own career, we don't have to talk about those things and how that's okay. But no, don't be a final girl.
Exactly.
And talking about, and that is true. And Vince says, Jamie Lee reference, 100 points. Yes. But that is kind of how it is with certain actors in whatever genre that you get kind of typecast, but how, horror is like the worst thing to be. And I know personally, like, I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So when it comes to certain actors who are on the sci-fi scene, you see them show up on different shows. It's like, do they just have a Rolodex of actors who are happy to be recurring characters on various different sci-fi shows, and they just work through that list? And for me, like, that list is sacred, but apparently the horror list is terrible.
So Craig, you were very inspired by the slashers of the 80s. Do you have a favorite slasher series? Do you have a favorite slasher standalone? Do you have a favorite final girl?
Yeah, I think that I'm more fascinated, at the age I'm at. When I was a teen, it was a lot different experience than this 50-something dude, right? So when I would, but in the 80s, yeah, I mean, it was like mind-blowing seeing Friday the 13th in the theater, the original, and Kevin Bacon with the little arrow and stuff. I was like, I couldn't believe it, and it was horrifying and exciting at the same time, because I really felt like I was in the presence of something new. I was almost like, I can't believe they're doing. They can't do that.
I remember watching.
They are not allowed to do that, but they're doing it. And
when I saw Happy Birthday to Me, I remember there's like a scene with like a shish kebab poker, and I was like, they can't do that. And part of me still thinks that when I see that scene, I'm like, oh, you can't do that.
Yeah, and I was just absolutely fascinated by it. And then Halloween, similar experience. by the time I even got to the Freddy, I was like moving on to other things in my life. I actually was out of horror. I had very little interest in horror through a lot of my 20s. I was not one of those horror babies, you know what I mean? Who's just found horror at a young age. And I
That's
sort of fell into,
I was like,
I liked it in
you're
the
not
80s.
a Jennifer. Yeah,
That's Jennifer.
I hear what you're saying, Craig.
Yeah.
I hear, like, I'm not like a Jennifer over there.
Well, I was going to ask then, what did you move on to? Because I'm kind of the opposite of Jennifer, and I also blame Jennifer because my older sister is a Jennifer in terms of like she was the one who was reading more of the horror growing up and wanting me to read it. I'm like, no, too scary. And she also got off on scaring me just in regular life. So I can see how this was all part of her maniacal plan. And I avoided it. And the only I think I read a little bit of Stephen King in high school, and it was The Stand, which we all agree is not horror. So it's like, I wasn't reading horror. I stood away from it. And then Jennifer kind of pushed me into it. I'd only read a little bit before then. And now it's like 80% of what I read, and this is all her fault. But it was
a plot.
But I do think you and my sister were communicating behind my back to drag me into it, and now I'm telling her about horror authors that she hasn't found, and like the roles have reversed. So, like I said, I was like the sci-fi girl and some fantasy. So when you moved away from horror, where did you find yourself?
Oh, sci-fi and fantasy, and that's when I found out I wanted to be a writer. I mean, I read Night Shift in high school, and I really loved that. But kind of fell away, moved out of horror very quickly into. I read a lot of Robert E. Howard, and I wanted to be Robert E. Howard. I was writing, gory shorts, warrior saves the princess and kills the dragon wizard and stuff, and ching, and I was doing all that, and like blood splattering and stuff. So there was it was like splatterpunk, but with swords. The librarian at my school, I presented it to her, and she actually came to my house and talked with my mom. Was like worried about me. I was going to be one of those kids. And I was like, yeah, thank you. Isn't this great?
Is there something going on at home that he needs to talk to somebody about this?
Yeah, she's like, I feel like it was just the plot advanced to hang on the next gory scene. And I was like, yeah, isn't it awesome? I was like in sixth grade.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Yeah. And I was reading Epic magazine and heavy metal. And of course, there was the nudity. Like that was like all the wish fulfillment you could want as a 13-year-old boy growing up on a farm outside a tiny town in rural New Jersey.
All you wanted was something to happen, honestly.
Yeah, I just wanted to escape, because I was losing my mind. Like I would fight corn stalks in the field next door, pretending that I was a Viking, and they were, just losing my mind and finding it salvation in fiction. But I wanted to be Robert E. Howard. It's like Colson Whitehead says. You read and read to find out what kind of writer you want to be, and then you write and write to find out what kind of writer you are. And so all of us in our teens and 20s, we're all writing, trying to be our favorite author. In fact, my first published work, to my great embarrassment to this day, Paranoia in 2001, this little small press thing, was me trying to be Chuck Palahniuk. And
what
it is.
We've all been there.
It's basically me trying to be. It's embarrassing.
Well, I'm still picturing you with the whatever you were using to attack the corn. I'm picturing you as Luke Skywalker, really upset that you aren't going to get to go around. You're like,
I was a Star Wars super freak. I had every trading card. I was super into. Oh my god, that was like that.
But I did just picture you on Tatooine.
I mean, that was cool. But Star Wars. I saw 9 times in the theater. I mean, I was like obsessed as a 9 or 10-year-old. I mean, I was just incredible. But yeah, and so what slasher from the Golden Age would you like to see?
Vince wants to know which slasher from the Golden Age from 78 through 85 would you most like to see remade or reimagined?
It's really tough. Because they're so iconic, I'm not sure how you do it. And they keep being reimagined with every sequel. It's sort of built into their franchises. Like if you look at Scream, that was all the old stuff reimagined, and then now the latest screens are completely reimagined.
Yeah.
We are in a meta phase for slashers. It's very cool to call out the tropes and invert and twist the tropes, and play it for comedy. I would think that if we were to do the slasher, yeah, I mean, it would have to be, to play it straight, you would have to, I mean, I want to say it's hard to do, but I'm actually doing it right now. I'm writing a duology that will come out from Hachette next year.
Mhm.
And it's 2 books. It's the deputy and then the sheriff. And so what I'm doing with I'm doing the classic summer camp, small town, lots of teens get killed.
Oh no!
But
Yay!
the bumbling deputy shows up too late to do anything except bear witness. And the sheriff didn't believe them and thought they were pranking and ignored their cries for help. And now, okay, this is that deputy story.
So I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot the deputy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. I'm still biting back when you said meta
Actually,
phase. And then
you're almost onto something there as
then
far as what ends up happening. But like, so
I'm just quoting
this
stuff
is
now.
the deputy's story of redemption, where he shows up and there's like bodies everywhere, and it's actually absolutely horrific. And he now investigates this as a real murder.
Right.
And where is that going to lead him? And then in the sequel, the sheriff, he's now the sheriff and is now completely believing that the monster is a supernatural killer, and he's going to make his stand. And this is his redemption story continuing and completing. And what I do with these stories is I take it very seriously. So I take every single slasher trope and I say, okay, you shoot the killer and he doesn't care. Why? You shoot him in the head and he goes down, but only for a brief period of time, just so he can jump up. Why? And I play it all straight. And I'm like, no, there's a reason for this. And there's a reason why he plays toys with his food. There's a reason why he doesn't just come in. If he's almost invincible, why doesn't he just walk up to everybody and, why is he scaring them and doing these grisly tableau? And, I have a reason for that. How does he end up right behind you and then he's in front of you? Seconds later. How does he know where you're hiding? I have a reason. So I explain every single thing, and it's playing it completely straight, but people will have fun recognizing all the classic tropes from every single slasher horror movie. But this is the deputy's story. This is what he brings to the table and his redemption in a retold slasher story that is completely played straight.
Love it. And I think Vince is just there for the dead teens, as he says. He's like, dead teens.
Dead teens.
By the bucket, bro. I mean, because it's a cyclical thing. Every so many years, this thing returns. Teens die. The sheriff ignores it. Why? Is why? But it happens. I explain it. It happens.
I love the way you just said that, but it happened. Like, of course it happens. Why does he ignore
it? It happens. And now with Tom, our deputy, soon, later sheriff, him and the final girl are going to team up and try and stop the cyclical slaughter once and for all, because he believes her, and the law enforcement is now going to do something.
Yeah, I love how these things are like cicadas. They're like, we come out every so often, and it's just it's in our biological clock to come back and murder. It just happens.
Yes, it happens. It happens. Before we end, I just have to ask, how and why did you come back to horror? Like, you did the zombie thing. I know. So you were Robert E. Howard. You're fantasy.
Well, I always like sci-fi and fantasy. I got my early publication was with the zombie books, and that was apocalyptic horror. Jonathan Mayberry told me really early on, don't call it horror, call it apocalyptic thriller. People are scared of horror. They don't like horror. And I'm like, oh, that's actually really good advice. And I would go to the bookstore and I'd be like, oh, look at that little horror section. You know, it's so cute, right? And
Yeah,
like,
it's so
and
cute.
Like
it'd be fun
3
to be
shelves
in
of
that
Stephen
community.
King.
Yeah, exactly. Anne Rice, Stephen King, Dean Koontz, and there's like 3 other
only
books.
about Koontz.
Yep. And so I'm like, but it'd be fun to be in that little community. And look at that. But I was always sci-fi fantasy guy. And then, you know, when I wrote Stuff for the Children, it was really billed as horror. And Stuff for the Children did really well with Simon and Schuster. That then I was like, okay, I'm going to write another horror novel, because all the editors out there were like, read Stuff for the Children, and they either passed on it or they passed on it, but they were like, oh, we like this Craig dude. Like, we like Stuff for the Children, we just couldn't publish it. But like, what else has he got? And so you're now maximizing your luck.
Yeah.
And it's all luck, and you're maximizing your luck. I kind of went with that path instead of saying, no, I like writing, you know, I'm like, well, horror's cool too, because what I really like is speculative fiction, where I could write realistic things.
You're saying my magic words.
That weirdo twist.
Yep.
This is the one thing that doesn't belong. It's all broken. And what does that mean?
Yes.
And here's the fractured mirror. Here's the human soul. Like, you can do so much with it. Yeah. And I don't like just writing the same, like, just literary drama. Like, I that's fine. I just don't find as much to plumb from it as I can if I throw a speculative fiction element in there, play it straight, have everyone react to it. And now you have ordinary people in very extraordinary situations, and you really find out what they're made of. In apocalyptic, you really, really find out. But in sci-fi, you can play with it as well. But in horror, you can do the exact same thing. And as someone who's had a lot of trauma in his life, I'm fascinated by that. The psychology of it, horror and terror, and how people react to fear. I'm really just fascinated by the whole thing. And we now I'm lucky to be able to write in this new renaissance. And I'm going to say thank you, Jordan Peele, probably more than anyone else. He's the guy who said, you like horror, but you won't call it horror.
Yep.
Because you don't like horror, but you do. So here's horror. Come up with your new name for it. And now we got past all, you know, they were like, New York Times is like, horror sucks, but Jordan Peele, this is the new horror, right? Like,
he's doing
all this stuff, twisting
he's doing
around.
something different. Oh, it's, you know, it's a mirror on our reality. Oh, it's symbolism. Oh, it's not. Yeah. And it's like, that's what we're trying to tell you.
You're like,
but it's horror. It's a Big Ten. And it's so wonderful. He kind of busted it open, and horror's kind of going through this new renaissance. And you can go into the bookstore and you don't find the same thing over and over and over again. You know, even if you do, in a way, like, there's always horror movie books, right? And then we're all like, I thought I was carving out.
I was doing my own thing, I swear.
Yeah.
Well, and in my bookstore now, the horror section is, I think, about as big as the sci-fi fantasy section. It's hard to tell because one is like this and the other one's flat. And the sci-fi fantasy is also like half of it's manga
is going
too.
Through
so
this
it's like
weird thing in my bookstore where it's like, there's the romantasy section.
Yeah,
and
that's
then there's this
something.
little sci-fi section.
Yep.
And the teen section is taking over.
Yep.
Which is, you know, I'm not one to blame the teens for everything, but like,
no, it's not even the teens. It's the adults reading the teens, because they're the teens are like,
but that's the thing. I mean, the only thing I resent about the young is they have so many more book choices than I did.
How dare?
Then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were like 10 years old sneaking Stephen
Judy
King
Blume
and
the Hardy Boys. Yeah. Like, that was when I was your age.
When I was your age,
Blume and the Hardy Boys.
And I'm like, I had Nancy Drew, I had Christopher Pike, and then it was immediately to Stephen King.
I was going to say, we did not have the gateway, like the nice, easy path along our reading. It went Babysitter's Club, Dean Koontz. There was no
exactly.
We didn't have anything.
We were reading about murder at the age of 13.
Well, exactly. That and Robin Cook. I'm
they're so lucky. They're so lucky. I envy them for that one thing. Actually, for a lot of things, they're young, but that one thing, I super envy them. They have all the book choices, and their section at my bookstore is taking over. It's really something. But anyway, back to horror. It's a really big tent. the only thing that unites horror is the emotion of horror.
It's a feeling.
There's nothing else to it.
Well, and unlike romance, there's not beats that you have to do or it's not. Like horror, it's like, what's the feel? Then you're done.
Yeah.
That's all it's supposed
it can be vibes. It can be,
vibes.
This seems normal, but I'm just very unsettled.
Yep.
Yes.
That's horror. Like that's
and it's
why
such a
I love
spectrum of horror, such a spectrum of feeling, right?
And I love
with episode 13, I just wanted to cultivate dread. That was the whole idea of the book, I wanted you to have a feeling of dread.
Okay, and then good to know going in. Like I will wait till I'm ready for dread.
It's fun dread too, but it is very, it is
dread is really fun.
Very dready.
It is amped up. Oh, look, I'm like getting uncomfortable. I'm like, it is so good.
Yeah.
Craig, you have been absolutely fantastic.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Please come back for my ex Antichrist, because
I would be happy to do that.
When I saw that title, I was like, is he writing about my ex? He might be the Antichrist.
I'm getting a lot of that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, did you see
that part's resonating?
Mine only wishes.
Yeah. Mine's thriving to be that. So everybody, if you have not read How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive, please go out, buy this book from your local independent bookseller.
Or listen, because we like to listen.
Or listen.
Get the
or episode 13.
Michael Brown did the audiobook, and he's
so
terrific. He and I, because I do a lot of self-publishing, and I actually write a lot of World War II history novels.
I saw that on your website.
Yeah,
I was just like
military fiction, supernatural military. And I've done like 15 books with him now.
You guys are soulmates. I love it.
I know.
Your
cool.
audiobook.
He's so pro and he's so good.
He's your final girl.
He's your final boy. So thank you again, Craig. Everybody who's watching this live or watching the replay or listening to us, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Vince, for commenting. I know this episode was right up Vince's alley. We are going to be back in 2 weeks with Amber Garza, just nailing down the exact date and time on that one. Amber, you may know her from her domestic thrillers, but she has written her very first horror novel. I
feel like she did it just for you, Jennifer.
Me, I'm just gonna be like, I inspired her. So we are very excited to have Amber in 2 weeks. So thank you all. How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive. Till then, bye.
Bye.